I turned it before. Grace and peace, God's people. Pastor Chelsea Sims of Trinity AME Zion Church here. Trinity AME Zion Church is located 123 South Academy Street, Blacksburg, South Carolina, 29702. Looking forward to seeing you really soon. Doing your Make Your Day post for today. And I have 6 days left of these. So this one is called Be Content. As though some of you know, the number 6 is the number of man. So we're going to be discussing that. As you know, on this particular program, we talk about mastering your day, being gods of the day, instituting and determining what will be in your life. Saints, I want to tell you one of those things is that we must be content. The only thing that messed up the garden experience of Adam and Eve's life, not only their lives, I need you to understand this, it didn't just happen to Adam and Eve. The same thing that happens to Adam and Eve allegorically happens to all of us. Analogously happens to all of us. All of us have moments, times, and periods in our life where we are not content. Adam and Eve are not content in their condition. They believe that they can improve their condition and get better. And what do they decide to do? They decide to make an alliance with the serpent. Good morning, Sister Davis. They decide to make an alliance with the serpent. They decide to make an alliance with the serpent because the thought process is the alliance that they already have is, I guess, not enough. You and I know the truth of it. You and I know what happens to them. You and I understand because we've seen the end of the story that when you bet against God, you bet against yourself. When you try and play God, you end up playing yourself. When you're on the wrong side of God, you end up being on the wrong side of history. You end up being on the wrong side of what happens, and you end up looking like a masterful fool. This is what happens to Adam and Eve, but this happens to us daily because we are not content. There is a difference between striving and being ambitious for goals that God has allowed you to have versus trying to usurp, get above, go on top of what God commands in your life. We must be content, satisfied, good with the condition that God has put us in and placed us in. This is why so many people have a messed up understanding of the scripture. I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. Paul is not saying in Philippians, I think it's 4:13, but wherever it is in Philippians, Paul is saying, I do all things through Christ which strengthens me. He's not necessarily saying he can do all things. Elsewise, he would just break out with wings and start flying. That's not what he's trying to tell you. What he's trying to say is the scripture above, which says, I've learned to live abased, and I've learned to live abound. I've learned to live with a plenty. I've learned to live with little. I've learned to have a bunch of stuff, and I've learned to have no stuff. I've determined that no matter the condition of my life, I will be satisfied with God. I will be content with the condition that he has put me in. Saints, you cannot rest and be okay with mediocre living that's coming from you. You can't be mediocre. You can't live a life that's less than. You can't be coming from a low place. You have to be the best you that you can be. Hi, Prophet Davis, how are you? Blessings to you, sir. Hey, good morning, Sister Raquel. You have to be the best you, yes. There's nothing wrong with striving to be the best you. There's nothing wrong with pushing and doing your best and working hard and doing everything that God has for you to do. There's nothing wrong with that, being fully the call that God has on your life. Some of us use being content as an excuse for us not to try hard. Some of us use, the Bible say, be content. Whatever state I find myself in is well with my soul. You know, it's supposed to be done. We use that as a reason not to do our best. When God tells us those two situations happen back to back. First, Adam and Eve are not content in their condition. And so they try to do more. They ambitiously go beyond what God has required for their lives. Then Cain gives God a gift that he's just content with and is not his best. God is juxtaposing or putting those two concepts right next to each other, that you can see striving to be more than what God has called for you is sin, and doing less than what you can do is also sin. So we need to see what contentment truly is. Contentment is being okay with who God has made me to be. Peter has this problem. Paul has this problem because he says, I've been a clean man. I never ate nothing unholy, never made nothing unclean. And God says, don't you call nothing I made unclean. The position that you're in, what you're forced to be around unclean things, is because God has you in that position. And what shall you say against the will of God? It's the problem that Peter has when he tries to cut off the ear of the soldier, the centurion soldier, when they're in the Garden of Eden. When they're in the Garden of Gethsemane. he says, whoa, what you doing? Jesus says, what you doing? I got to accept the plot that God has over my life. Like I could call the thousands of angel armies to come down here for me, but I got to be content where God has placed me. Look what he says to him in Matthew 16:18. When Jesus is having a conversation with Peter, Peter says, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. He said, flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And I'm going to have to die and go to be with my Father. Good morning, Professor Green. He says, I gotta die and go and be with my Father, right? And then after he says this, Peter's next statement is, oh no, you ain't gonna die. I'm gonna fight that. You ain't gonna die. I'm gonna do this. He tries to be ambitious. He tries to be beyond content with what God has made happen. So first and foremost, we have to differentiate. We have to decide and determine the difference between what God's will for our lives is, what position God has placed us in, and what position we have placed ourselves in by a lack of effort and a lack of force and responsibility. Once we determine what those things are, we got to be content with God's things. But we don't have to be content with doing less than. We don't have to be content with not doing our best. We don't have to be content in rendering unto God just something. We've got to give him our absolute best. We've got to give him all that we are. Saints, I'm way over my time. I pray that you all are blessed with this. If you are blessed, do me a favor. Send this to somebody in their messenger and tag somebody and post it on your Facebook wall for me. That would help us with the Facebook algorithm, help us move forward with the things that we're doing. Share it with somebody that you know is either having foolish ambition, righteous ambition, righteous contentment, or unrighteous contentment. All right? I pray this word has blessed you, and the Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and grant you his peace. You all be blessed.